Okay, setup of Middle Creek. Middle Creek from the Rebel Yell series. So this is it's by one small step. It's Middle Creek is a folio game, but is a full implementation of Rebel Yell. Let me explain what I'm doing because it won't necessarily be obvious. Here's Middle Creek, by the way. I want to set up the game, looking to play this one. This one really looks like a good way to get into the Rebel Yell game, but the scenario itself. Earlier, I'm right in the middle actually of listening to a video, and I am going to keep it going because I'm not going to take a break from it. So I'll tell you I guess a bit of an introduction is in order of what I'm listening to, because it has nothing to do. I'm having fun setting up the game. By the way, I've got all of my counters here just off the camera on the side of the map board here. Who's the first to set up? Clay and Thomas. Clay and Thomas right here. Here's Clay and Thomas. They're the first ones to set up, so I have all my counters over here. I'm having fun computers. I'm having fun setting up. I've listened. I'm 45 minutes into a video that I was watching earlier. I'm going to continue because I'm setting up the game. But this is a video about Andy Marshall. Speaking are Krapinovich and Barry Watts. Andrew Krapinovich and Barry Watts. So they're the talkers. This is a kind of a professional presentation, but they have actually just finished their remarks, and they're actually just about to start the question and answer period. So that's what I have playing in the background. Again, I'm picking up again, having fun setting up here. Though such a great game. I'm just as I'm reviewing stuff here with Middle Creek again, I'm getting excited again about Rebel Yell. Such a great design. But let's go. Clay and Thomas are cavalry units, and gonna start setting up. In anticipation of play.
Thanks for a great talk. I'm very interested in Proud Prophet. You discussed it in the book for a while, but do you add anything to it or comment more on its impact and importance?
Proud Prophet 83 was a war game that was held during a 2-week period over in Indy National Defense University. I was on the red team. I was basically the red air guy. I can remember about day 2, I and my fellow red guys were looking at the situation that the game had presented and decided that we weren't going to go to war. And we came into work the next morning and discovered from the control team that we had decided, in fact, to go to war. So it was a very frustrating game from the standpoint of just me as a participant in it. And eventually the thing, leaked off into nuclear use and large-scale nuclear exchanges. What I didn't know at the time, and we did mention this in the book, was that behind the scenes, the chairman and the Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, were playing the game, and their goal was to evaluate our nuclear strategy. And basically the conclusions that they took away from the game was our nuclear strategy was not very workable. In fact, it was really wanting. And it led to specific things like trying to decrease the enthusiasm of some parts of the Pentagon and the services for things like horizontal escalation. Because it became apparent in the game that the Navy going out in the Far East and doing a little horizontal escalation was likely to lead to a nuclear exchange. Now, the backstory on that particular episode was that Secretary Weinberger and the chairman basically swore the small number of people at NDU, in SCDC at the time, who actually knew what was going on, what the real game being played was, to not mention that for 25 years. And in fact, it was not until 2008 at a conference on net assessment that CSBA held that Phil Carver, who has been one of the participants in SCDC, finally said the 25 years are up, and let me tell you what was really going on. I mean, you know, you felt like a buffoon, because I went through the entire 2 weeks of the game and had no clue. Nor, I think, did very many of the 200 or so other participants in the game. It was just a small inner circle under the SCDC organization over at NDU.
Jim Baker had a question about intellectual courage, and each of the chapters in the book has a quote from Marshall, one of which he said fairly early on, which really resonated, I think, throughout his tenure. And his statement was, "We're here to inform, not to please." And if it was worth his time and his effort to leave Rand, to leave California, where his wife Mary really wanted to live, and come back to Washington, then by golly, he was going to be a straight shooter on these things. And typically, where he ran into trouble was with Secretary of Defense like Weinberger, who just really didn't seem to value what Marshall was doing. Although he and Marshall later became pretty close, but in the 1980s, when Weinberger was there, that was not the case. Marshall's one of the kindest, gentlest people you'll ever want to meet, which is why when Weinberger left, there was an incident that caused a lot of jaws to drop. And at the time, the portraits of former defense secretaries were in the A-ring outside the Office of Net Assessment, 3A930, or I think that's right. And after Weinberger had left, after I guess the portrait was finished, they were going to have the ceremony, and of course the portrait is shrouded, and they're going to pull the shroud down, and nice words and so on. They had the chairs set up and a little food on the side. And we knew that Marshall had been invited, and yet it wasn't on his calendar to go to that ceremony honoring Caspar Weinberger. And so on the morning, we're out in the outer office, and Marshall is there, and he didn't have his go to a ceremony suit on. It was more or less the standard workaday suit. And one of my colleagues summoned up the courage to ask him, "Sir, are you going to the Weinberger ceremony?" And he responded, "I might go if they were hanging Weinberger instead of his picture." So, are there any other questions? In the back? Yes, ma'am. That's a question for Jim Baker, isn't it? Really, I'll give you sort of the function of the office basically responds to the Secretary of Defense, and so different secretaries, based upon their needs, have used it in different ways over the years. I don't want to put you on the spot, Jim, but sort of now that Mr. Marshall's retired, what's the function of the Office of Net Assessment? What's the future?
Yeah, so the Secretary Carter now what it is he expects from the office. It's unclassified, it's probably posted on the website, so probably. And he articulates 5 or 6 very specific things that he expects the office to do, all of which are very much in keeping with the historical direction that's been laid out by our 2 guests. So I think that shows 2 things. One,